Hello, fellow drinkers at the Jolly Heretic. Resident Poet here. Hope you're all well, and a hello again to those of us who've come here from History Debunked. So I'm sure some of you last night caught Ed's stream at the Jolly Heretic, which was devoted to the late Margaret Dutton. Margaret being Ed's cat, the pub cat at the Jolly Heretic, who passed away very sadly about a week and a half ago. And Ed was kind enough to invite me on last night to read a poem that I'd written, and I will now read that again. It's called Requiescat in Pace. We were all very shocked when we heard the news. Margaret had passed, and so no more muse. She'll be sadly missed by all at the pub, taken from us. Alas, there's the rub. 15 full years, in cat terms, that's ages. We'll work through our grief, it does come in stages, but how we'll lament her saturnine features. She certainly was the finest of creatures. And so farewell then, dear Margaret of Dutton. It's a shame that with cats, there's no reset button. So hopefully that did something to, express my condolences and the condolences of other fellow regular drinkers at the Jolly Heretic. I'm sure Margaret will have a very fitting and solemn funeral. And speaking of funerals, to try and keep the level up a bit, it did remind me of something of a funny story, which hopefully I can now tell to you. There's these two mates, and they decide one lovely day to go out for a game of golf. And they get to about halfway round, so around about the 9th hole. And in the distance, just at the edge of the golf course, they can see a funeral cortege going past. So a jet black hearse and a troop of mourners right behind. And upon seeing this, one of the golfers, he drops his club and he immediately doffs his cap and stands there in silent reverie for about a minute or so until the cortege has passed by. And his mate says to him, "Well, that was a very decent gesture." And the original guy says, "Well, it's the least I could do. She was a damn good wife to me." So hopefully that, cheered some of you up after the recent sad news about Margaret. I hope all of you, or at least some of you even, saw Ed's longer video on Friday, his proper session as opposed to a quick pint, which told us about the rather shocking story of a researcher called Diederik Stapel, who has spent quite a lot of time, apparently, falsifying data for inclusion into various academic papers in order to prove a certain conclusion that he'd already predetermined in advance. Now, I thought that was pretty shocking, although it did give us a great showcase, as it were, of Ed's Dutch accent. And it got me thinking, and I wonder whether anyone can answer this question, perhaps in the comments below. Is there such a language as Dutch, or is it just English and a Dutch accent? I think we should know. I've been hearing this sort of accent for years now, and I just wondered whether it was the real deal, the real McCoy. So in any case, it did prompt me to write a poem. The lefties are not only flawed, they're also now guilty of fraud. We must now besmirch their shoddy research. They belong in a hospital ward. And around about the same time last week, Simon, our good friend at History Debunked, he produced one of his many videos telling us of the opinion of some others that Simon himself wasn't a serious historian, which, as we all know, is nonsense. He's published at least 12 books, I believe, and is a man of huge historical knowledge. It is clear that our Simon is serious. To think that he's not is delirious. Those on the left are sadly bereft. Their anger is far from mysterious. Simon, not long afterward, mentioned a book which is replete with historical falsehoods on the very much discussed modern topic of slavery. Lots of nonsense is talked about slavery. In fact, one can say it is knavery. The book Simon cites does denigrate whites. To read it requires some bravery. And then the next day, Simon released a little clip on the subject of the Dark Lord, as some know him, the former British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who, along with his World Economic Forum cronies, has suggested the inception of a huge database detailing everyone's individual vaccine status. So you can imagine how that's going to look. Ah, yes, our old friend, Tony Blair. He's the acme of devil may care. If you've not had the jab, your info he'll grab, and then you will be beyond prayer. Simon, not long after, recounted recent occurrences of public disturbances in the central London area over the last few months, involving people from such diverse places as Iraq, Albania, and Morocco. Those lovely folk from overseas think that it must be a wheeze to make a huge row while we must kowtow. It makes me feel quite ill at ease. In the same video, one of the commenters below the line made a reference to Norman Tebbit, who was a minister in Mrs. Thatcher's administration in the 1980s. And around about 1990, he floated the idea of something that he referred to as the cricket test, which would be a test of newcomers' allegiance to the UK, because it would test whether they supported the cricket team of England or the cricket team of their country of origin. Now, even at the time, I dimly recall that this was controversial, but were Mr. Tebbit or Lord Tebbit to make such comments today, who would be hanged, drawn and quartered, or at the very least cancelled. But still just shows you that not much really changes over the years. Lord Tebbit, his test featured cricket. It sounds like it's now just the ticket. But this gentle sport, these folk won't support. They probably tell you to stick it. So that was a bit of a trip down memory lane there in terms of Lord Tebbit. And then around about the same day, Ed produced a quick video as to the question of whether there can be right-wing spiteful mutants. Now, we all know that there are very, very many left-wing spiteful mutants, but Ed mooted the idea that it could be possible that we might see the odd one or two right-wing ones. Knowledge Ed Dutton does bring. Are some spiteful mutants right-wing? We have to assess that the answer is yes. Overall, it's an interesting thing. And then around about the same time, Ed produced a video on another sort of marginal case as to whether woke women can actually be quite attractive and pleasing to the eye, controversial as that may seem. I think we would have to admit that some of these woke birds are fit, but to stress once again, they are a right pain. Their allure is quite counterfeit. So that was my roundup of this week's news in terms of through the mouthpiece of both the Jolly Heretic, Ed Dutton, and History Debunked, Simon Webb. I hope that's cheered you all up about the bad news about Margaret. She's in a better place now. I don't mean Sweden as opposed to Finland. I do mean that she's hopefully in paradise. So hopefully you enjoyed this. If you did, please do like and subscribe using the buttons below. And hopefully we'll see each other very soon. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.